The gravel crunched beneath Daniel's boots as he stepped out of the cab and stared at the house. It stood like a forgotten monument at the edge of the forest, its paint peeled, windows smeared with dirt, the roof sagging like tired shoulders. Ivy crawled up the stone walls like veins on ancient skin. The locals had warned him about it. "Don't stay there," the cab driver had muttered, not even looking at the house. "People say it talks at night." But Daniel wasn't the kind to believe in ghost stories. He was a travel blogger, a skeptic who made his living debunking myths and exploring abandoned places. This house, known in the nearby village as Eleanor's Hollow, was the subject of countless legends, a perfect setting for his next viral video. He unlocked the rusted gate and walked up the overgrown path to the front door. The key, he'd been mailed weeks ago, slid into the lock like it had been waiting for him. The door creaked open on its own, too smoothly. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of mold. Furniture lay under white sheets, giving the illusion of ghostly figures frozen in time. The wallpaper had curled away from the walls in places, exposing cracked plaster. A heavy silence blanketed the space, broken only by Daniel's footsteps as he explored. He found the study at the end of a long hallway. A grand desk, layered in dust, stood beside a tall window that looked out into the trees. It would be his workspace for the next week. He set down his camera gear, opened his laptop, and began recording notes for his blog. "Day 1, he said aloud. "The house is creepy, but nothing unusual so far. Locals say people hear whispers at night. We'll see." The first night passed mostly uneventfully. Daniel built a fire in the old fireplace, cooked a simple meal, and read some of the local folklore he'd printed out. He laughed at the more ridiculous claims. One story spoke of a woman who whispered from the walls, asking people to find her. Another said time been inside the house. Typical urban legend nonsense. Just past midnight, as he was shutting down for bed, he heard it. WHSSSS. "Daniel." He froze. The voice was faint, like wind slipping through a crack in the wall. But there was no wind. The air was still, dead still. "Hello," he called out. No answer. He walked through the house, flashlight in hand. Every room was empty. The doors were locked. There was no one there. "Probably just my imagination," he muttered, and returned to the bedroom. But as he lay down, a single phrase repeated in his mind like an echo. "Daniel. Come find me the next morning." Daniel tried to convince himself it had just been a dream. The whisper, the feeling of being watched, the cold draft that swept through the room without explanation. It had to be in his head. Maybe the isolation was getting to him already. He spent the day exploring the house with his camera, documenting the old furniture, broken picture frames, and dusty corners for his video. But no matter how focused he tried to stay, the thought of the voice kept creeping back. When the sun dipped behind the trees and darkness settled over the house, Daniel found himself hesitating. He didn't light the fireplace. He didn't read. He just sat at the desk, staring into the dim hallway beyond the study door, as if expecting something or someone to appear. By midnight, the whisper returned. "Daniel, I'm still here." This time it wasn't distant. It was right behind him. He spun around, heart pounding. The room was empty, but his laptop screen flickered, glitched, and for a moment, a strange face appeared. A pale woman with long dark hair, eyes completely black, mouth open in a silent scream. Then it was gone. Daniel staggered back, knocking over the chair. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. Shaking, he grabbed his flashlight and decided to search the basement. He hadn't gone down there yet. It smelled like mildew and rot, and he hadn't had a reason. But now he did. The basement door creaked open with difficulty. A heavy, damp air rushed up from below. As he descended the narrow wooden steps, the flashlight flickered. The basement was cluttered with old trunks, shelves of broken tools, and stacks of rotted books. And then he saw it. Behind a pile of crates, a loose wooden board in the wall. Something stuck out from the crack. A leather-bound journal. Curious, Daniel pried it loose and flipped through the yellowed pages. The ink was faded but readable. It belonged to a woman named Eleanor Whitmore. Each entry grew more frantic as it went on. The voices returned last night. I heard them in the walls again. They call my name. They whisper secrets no living soul should know. I think the house is alive. It doesn't want me to leave. They said I'm part of it now, that I'll never be alone again. Daniel's hands trembled as he turned the final page. I buried him in the walls. The man who tried to burn it down. The house made me do it. I can still hear him screaming. The air grew colder. The flashlight dimmed. And then he heard it again, closer than ever. Come find me. Suddenly, footsteps echoed above him. Slow, deliberate, pacing the hallway outside the study. He bolted up the stairs, but the moment he reached the first floor, the footsteps stopped. The entire house was still. Daniel stood there, breathing heavily, gripping the journal like a lifeline. He tried to leave the house that night. Tried. He opened the front door and found himself staring not into the moonlit woods, but back into the same hallway he just walked down. Confused, he turned and tried the back door. Same result. Every exit now led deeper inside. It was as if the house had folded on itself, trapping him in a maze with no way out. No, this isn't happening, he said, backing away. The walls pulsed. The floorboards groaned. And from every corner of the house, whispers began to pour in, layered voices, dozens of them, chanting in an unintelligible language, rising in volume like a storm. He dropped to his knees, covering his ears, screaming. Then, sudden silence. A single voice whispered into his ear, "Don't leave me." He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the study with every light turned on, journal in hand, trying to find answers. Somewhere in the pages had to be a clue, a ritual, anything that could help him escape. One passage stood out. It needs a story. It needs someone to tell what happened here. That's how it keeps breathing. Daniel stared at his laptop. Slowly, he placed his fingers on the keyboard. He began to type. The glow of Daniel's laptop cast eerie shadows on the study walls as he typed furiously. His hands moved faster than his thoughts, guided by some force he couldn't understand. Words flowed from his fingers like water from a broken dam. Memories that weren't his, events he couldn't possibly have known. She was lonely, he typed. The house whispered to her, promised her love, eternity. All she had to do was stay. He paused. Sweat clung to his skin, though the air around him had gone cold. He was writing Eleanor's story. Not just what he'd read in the journal, but things she'd never written. Outside the window, the moonlight turned crimson. Suddenly, the room vibrated, as if the house itself were breathing. The light bulbs flickered wildly. And then the sound came again. She's waiting. The voice was inside the room now. Not in his ears, not in his head, but in the walls, the floor, the very air. He stood, heart racing, the journal clutched to his chest. She never left. He stumbled out of the study, flashlight trembling in his grip. The hallway had changed. It was longer now, impossibly long. Doors lined the sides, ones he didn't remember seeing before. Each one whispered. Some sobbed. Others laughed. One whispered in his own voice. Daniel opened the first door. It led to a bedroom, perfectly preserved, untouched by time. A small music box sat on the dresser, its lid open, playing a haunting lullaby. He stepped closer. The mirror above the dresser suddenly cracked, forming a spiderweb of fractures. And in the broken reflection, he saw her. Eleanor. She stood behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. He ran. The house was no longer a house. It had become a labyrinth. The doors rearranged themselves. The staircases bent at odd angles. Windows looked out into voids of swirling darkness. And all the while, the whispers followed him. One door, slightly ajar, beckoned him in. He hesitated, then pushed it open. It was the basement. But it wasn't like before. Now, the walls were covered in strange symbols, burned into stone, glowing faintly. A circle was drawn in the center of the floor, and in it, the burnt remains of a man's body. Daniel fell to his knees. The journal had mentioned someone who tried to destroy the house. This had to be him. The man Eleanor had buried in the walls. The air shifted, and then she was there. Eleanor, no longer a whisper. She stood across the room, her long black dress swaying, her hair hiding her face. Her body was thin, almost skeletal, her hands too long, her skin stretched tight like wax. "You came," she whispered. Daniel tried to speak, but no sound came. "I waited," she continued. "All I ever wanted was someone to tell my story. Someone who would never leave. I didn't mean—" Daniel finally choked. "I didn't know." "You do now." She stepped forward. "I gave the house my voice. Now it needs yours." She raised her hand, and his legs buckled beneath him. Invisible roots shot from the floor, wrapping around his ankles, dragging him toward the center of the circle. "No. Stop," he screamed, thrashing. "You'll stay," she said softly, "just like me, and they will all hear you." He was pulled into the center of the circle. The whispering reached a deafening pitch. The lights blew out. Darkness swallowed everything. Then silence. Days passed. Weeks. The villagers never noticed anything unusual. The house just sat there as always, rotting slowly under the weight of its own secrets, until a hiker passed by and saw a dim light in the study window. Curious, he approached. Inside, he found an old laptop, still open, the screen still glowing, and on it a document titled "The House That Whispers at Night" by Daniel Cross. The last line read, "I am the story now." The hiker turned to leave, but paused. Was that a whisper?